PDF? Yes, that's better because I'm a Mac guy, so sometimes Mac PowerPoint's not printed as well as they ought to. All right,
Thank you, Jamie. I assume that's what I wanted, or was that from the police department? Okay. Thank you so much. Oh, turn your mic on. So I don't know.
We have the solution to that problem. All you gotta do is don't pay for it.
So, I don't know. Some modern medicine. How's your husband doing?
It's okay. The scan yesterday, so it's waiting for results again.
I don't have any other pen. Yeah, probably have something. I'm sorry I forgot it.
Yes, yes.
Remind me to give it back to you.
They do. Yep.
Sir, did you get my email?
No, I've been in conferences all week.
Okay, I did some research and billing medical marijuana for feds taxes.
Okay.
And all of the states are now starting to remove them from those exempt from regular farms. And it was on the news last night. Most of the, or many at least, of the farms that are dependent on our guards. I don't think we should do that, so I wrote you an email. I think if we do this, we need to look through it and make sure we do it right. And I probably should cite some of the examples. And I explained a couple of choices, so when you get it, take a look at it. But yes, I want them to think Chino Valley is, you know, when we say something.
Well, We're sending it to Karen Fan first, and she listens to us.
Yeah, but I think we need to justify it with, she's not gonna look at all the appreciate it and stuff, so we need to support it. I just talked to her, she is one of the feds. They tax them even though they're illegal.
We haven't gotten we talked about London. Well, I know what I want. We got some.
Do you have the list? It wasn't in our agenda itself, this discussion on the bond folks, the personnel for the committee.
That price still be in your agenda packet.
Okay, well, I thought you wanted to discuss tonight.
About chairing, about putting people in the seats, but who you actually put in the seat. I mean, you can talk about that tonight.
Oh,
No, we can't.
But you
'cause
didn't
it's
bring
not
the
on
list, you didn't put the
agenda.
list in,
No, but
It's not on the
for your
agenda.
official meeting on the 8th, but I'll get you.
or the names are not in there.
Yeah, well, you can't.
Robert?
I'm hearing voices. Since it's not listed, okay, we'll mention staffing it, and then we'll Tuesday we'll.
Because there's two questions really. One is, how do you want to go about filling those chairs? Because last time it was a combination of appointments, and then you as a group decided on the rest. And then who the actual people are.
Okay, how are you doing?
Kind of the second question.
Right.
But I can get you that list right now and send you the packet.
No.
Oh gosh, you too, huh?
The list is not in there.
Yeah, that's what he was telling me to do it. I didn't
Agenda items in
That's
here,
why,
but the list.
what's her name goes to the
think I'm discussing the actual people.
Lola goes to.
Oh, you got this letter. I don't know.
So did you get over, got some bruises?
No, my scars are healing up.
Battle scars.
Battle scars, yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty much over them.
Sounds scary.
Boy, yeah, scary. Good, never let me.
Well, that's good. You must be very holy now.
I can say I walked on glass. I'm not sure what that means, but I did.
I walked on water before it was frozen.
Yeah, me too.
Chino family.
Oh, really? Yeah, mine always pops when I look at Dallas, but there's not something to do. Oh, yeah. Be careful though, because heart attacks. No, I'm serious. Being in the jaw is one of the things with heart attacks. So just so you know. You could have a long-term heart attack. Really?
I never turned the radio on. It's the regular radio broadcast. Oh, my access went on time. That's my anthem.
Today is What day is today?
Today is the 3rd.
Thursday.
Okay, where the heck did this go? I didn't watch when I downloaded it. See where I put it.
You're late, Mayor. Let's go.
He's at daylight saving time.
He's socializing. Then he's really late.
I was trying to add something to the agenda that isn't on there. Yeah, he wants to have choosing the people on the committee. We can't.
I'm gonna go.
Yeah, he's trying, but you can't. You can't add it because it's not on there, because some of those people might want to go. Yeah, he thinks he appointed people, but we had to appear them as appointed. And that's what he's arguing, that Kevin should be able to appoint them. But that isn't what should happen, it should be the council.
Put an alternator.
Did you get it all straightened around, Chris?
Oh,
Okay.
they make
Have to
alternators.
tell these
just like
large
those.
You folks ready?
Yes.
All right. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. May we have the roll call, Ms. Lewis?
Good evening, Mayor Marley and Council. Councilmember McKee. Here. Councilmember Wojcik.
Here.
Councilmember Hatch.
Here.
Councilmember Best.
Here.
Vice Mayor Croft.
Here.
And Mayor Marley.
Here. First item is a presentation by economist.com regarding the results of the utilities rate structure analysis and review and discussion related to funding options, infrastructure, and bonding. Mr. Gripman.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is kind of an exciting evening. This is the culmination of many, many years of work. As you all know, Chino Valley has got some interesting utility ways of doing things with the Prescott system that we have here, with the fan plant, the way that it's set up here. We have developed over the last several years, we've done this many times, we've tried many attempts to acquire the Prescott system, and all of them have kind of fallen short. Tonight, though, we actually have a presentation from both Dan Jackson, and Joe is also going to do a presentation first on the town's financial position and why, answer some of the questions about why we're doing some of these things. But this is the start of what we believe that will give Chino Valley a very strong economic foundation to begin building on. So it's an exciting time. Again, it's the culmination of many, many years of putting this thing together. So with that, I'll introduce Joe, and he'll come up and do the first presentation. And I should tell everybody, I have about 10 copies of Dan's presentation, hard copies if anybody's interested in them. I only have about 10, but if you let me know, I can email you the copy of the presentation too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Mayor and Council, you know, one of the things that Ron did mention on is this has been a long time in coming, and we have done a lot of work. And sometimes after we fixed a few of our problems and fixed things, we forget how much work it actually was. So I'd like to review it, maybe not for you particularly, but for our audience, what the town has gone through in the last several years. Essentially, in 2012, the town was in a financial crisis. We were getting ready to fall off a fiscal cliff. Our general fund was burning through about $1 million a year, and in about the middle of 2015, you were projected to run out of money. Well, the same thing was happening with our water and sewer fund. It was burning through about $700,000 a year. And our water and sewer, we really call it our utility fund, but it's both of those entities together. So the town was faced with a significant financial crisis and had to come up with a way to fix the problems. Well, this is what the general fund was going to look like. It was heading straight down into the hole, and by the middle of 15, the town would have been bankrupt. So what the council did is they basically set out a nice plan for us and said, let's develop a strategic financial plan. And we spent, 8 months, 9 months, a significant amount of time meeting. We broke up into committees. We had people looking at our programs. We had people looking at alternate revenue sources. We evaluated all of our departments, all of our expenditures. We didn't leave one rock unturned. And it wasn't an easy process. It was a very time-consuming process, and we had multiple meetings. We looked at maybe adopting a property tax. We looked at a sales tax increase. And we reviewed everything that we could, looking for ways to save money, to consolidate services, to do things more economically. What we ended up after all this process is we reviewed and updated all of our user fees, so our building codes, even the price we pay for copies and all those things, made sure they're at market. We increased the sales tax rate by 1%. We made quite a few program changes. One of the things is we reduced the amount that we spend on running our aquatic center by over $100,000 a year. We updated our financial policies, including our contingency and reserve policies, so that we can make sure we have enough. One, we can notify the council that we're heading off this cliff the next time, if it ever happens again, which we hope it doesn't, but also that we keep adequate reserves so we can cushion ourselves from when we do have our ups and downs in our economy, because we are going to have those in the future. I will be able to tell you, as I present the new budget information, that we were able to fully fund our general fund reserve within 1 year. And usually when you set a reserve policy for a general fund, it's because you don't have enough in the bank to start with. And it takes a community a couple of years, multiple years sometimes, to get built up. But after this performance in this year's budget, I'm going to be able to confidently say that we've got it fully funded after 1 year. So. We reformatted the budget and really committed and continued to commit to budget revenues and expenses conservatively. And so we don't count the money until it's in the bank, and we don't spend it until we have it in the bank. So, and those processes have basically resulted in what this blue line shows is we've stabilized the general fund. We're right, we've righted the ship, we're okay. But the problem is we're still relying on the capital improvement fund. And what that is we take 1% of our sales tax collections and move it over to the capital improvement fund. And then we take part of that and send it back to the general fund because the general fund doesn't quite have enough money to make it. It's running in the red a little bit every year. And that green line on the chart shows what our fund balance would look like if we were not including the capital improvement fund money every year. The blue line includes it. The green line shows what it is without it. So you can see we've built up our fund balance, but we're still not there. We have some work to do. We need to increase our retail sales base. The water and sewer fund situation, pretty much the exact same thing. The town undertook a detailed water and wastewater rate study. We adopted a 5-year rate plan, and the rate plan had some assumptions that we haven't met yet. We still got to do it. But one of them was that we're going to add 430 new accounts this fiscal year. We haven't done it. And part of the part of the project we're going to talk about tonight adds accounts to meet that goal. The rate plan also factored in taking over the operation and ownership of really the operation of the wastewater treatment plant, and also undertook a water connection and valuation analysis of the Prescott water system, and we just completed that this year. This, like the general fund, shows that we're running out of money in the mid-2015, and we hired a consultant out of Texas who I'll name later, and his graph, the bottom green line, actually shows the exact same thing. So we've had not just internally, but we've had consultants tell us that, yeah, we need to fix the utility fund. And what we're doing, the way we cover that deficit is, again, we're taking money from that capital improvement fund and shipping it over to the water and wastewater fund. This, this graph shows where the blue line is really where we are now, and the green line, again, is where we'd be if we weren't sending money over from the capital improvement fund. So as you can see, if without that funding from the capital improvement fund, the utility funds are just not making enough money. They're not breaking even. And in both the general fund and the water and sewer fund, the one thing that's really important to remember is we're not spending any money on capital replacement. We're not buying new police cars. We're not able to replace a dump truck, or, if the loader, it's down, we need to do something with that. We have no money set aside for any capital improvement. So we're living on depreciation. And eventually that is going to come and bite us if we don't come up with a plan to start funding these capital needs as we go along. in the water and wastewater system, the exact same thing. You've got to continue to put capital into these systems to keep them viable, or at the end of the day, or 10, 20 years, you're going to pay, and you're going to pay a lot more if you don't maintain your systems. So, the idea here, the overall idea is, and part of this whole project, is that we were going to be able to reduce the amount of money the enterprise funds and the general fund take from this capital improvement project, and then be able to take those funds and start doing some of the capital investment that we need to do, including even road improvements that, is an unfunded, that we're living on the appreciation of our roads too. So the idea of this whole project, basically the top chart is what we're doing now. And as you see, most of what we're using it for is the debt service, the general fund debt service. But a lot of it, the red goes to water and sewer, the blue goes to the general fund, and the other is the carry forward and just what we have left to do any other projects with. But if we can get the general fund and the water and sewer funds off the capital improvement bucket, then we'll have a significant amount of money to start putting money into the capital needs of the community, and that's sort of what the fund was established to do. So that's what we're looking forward to. That's the end of my presentation. I will tell you, I would like to mention, though, this evening that Mr. Jackson, who I'll be introducing here in just a second, provided me the working models of the information behind what he's going to be presenting tonight. And you only see the top 1% layer in very summary form. I was thoroughly impressed with the depth that he goes through to model and to look at these figures. And I vetted out everything that I could vet out, and I really am very confident in the figures that he's presenting tonight. They're very well done. I think his assumptions are in line with the way we operate here, very conservative. And so I fully expect at the end of the day, we'll outperform or beat most of these estimates, but I think that it's a very conservative approach that he's taken. So we've definitely hired the right guy to do the job. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dan Jackson. He's a consultant from Texas and runs economist.com.
Excuse me, before you race off into the darkness, do we have any questions for Joe?
I just want to make sure he's going to stay in case we have questions.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we even have some people who know about bonds out in our audience.
We
so
do.
that'll be good. All right. Any questions here? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Dan Jackson. I'm the Managing Director and Chief Executive of economist.com. We've had the privilege and the pleasure of being the town's water and wastewater rate consultants for almost a decade now. We really appreciate the confidence you've shown us over the years, and I certainly appreciate the kind words Joe has given in his introduction to us. I want to talk tonight a little bit about the water and wastewater rate plan as it exists right now, and about some options you have going forward that will enable you to fund the capital improvements that you need to operate your system and to expand the system, and while at the same time being able to minimize the impact of these capital obligations on your ratepayers. Now, over the last couple of years, we've done a lot of separate analyses for the town. What we've done is, this is not the right presentation. This is the evaluation. I was looking at that chart and I said, wait a minute, that doesn't look right.
Well, while we're getting the technical difficulties dealt with,
that was my last presentation. It was a good one, believe me, but
while they're bringing up tonight's presentation, Mr. Jackson, would you like your questions after your presentation is finished?
yes, I would prefer the opportunity to go through the presentation first.
Okay.
That might actually answer a lot of questions people might have.
Okay.
Nope, that's not the right one either.
This is what was put in the folder that was.
Okay, let me, I've got it.
So I can bring up the whole packet.
If you'll give me just a second, I can download it from my Mac.
No problem.
Or we can bring it back and just pull it from there.
While that's being taken care of, a quick public service announcement. Our microphones have been going in and out off and on during our meetings, and fortunately, they're still being broadcast live. It's just that it goes out in the room here. So if any of our mics go out, please just project your voice a little bit. Folks out there can hear us. All right.
There you go.
Dan, she brought it up.
She brought it up.
You gotta make it smaller.
We're on the road now.
The only thing is, I don't know how to make it smaller in Windows 8.
Okay. That's why you should consider Macintosh.
There we go.
Thanks, Steve.
I can punch. You don't know to use keystrokes. There you go. See that?
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah, I can do
excuse
this
me,
one.
if the folks in the audience would
Okay.
be with us there.
Sure.
Go ahead, Mr. Jackson.
Okay. Over the last 18 months, we have done a number of separate analyses for the town. We've done the following. We did the original water and wastewater rate and financial plan that resulted in the 5-year rate plan that you put into place back in 2012. We also did a separate analysis that looked at the impact of acquiring the Fan wastewater treatment plant. That not only has an operational impact on the town, but it also impacts the town's financial ability as well. We then, in 2013, did an analysis of the expansion of Highway 89 and the resulting new accounts that would be hooked up. What we did is we looked at the water and wastewater fund, and we said it would cost you X amount of dollars to build the infrastructure to service Highway 89, but if you did that, you would get a lot of new accounts. To what extent would the new accounts pay for or offset the cost of building the Highway 89 expansion? And then finally, earlier this year, we did a valuation of the potential acquisition of the accounts owned by Prescott, but were in the town of Chino Valley, as well as the Wilhoit Water Company accounts as well. If the town of Chino Valley were to acquire the Prescott accounts, you would have to pay money to Prescott to buy them, but at the same time, you would be acquiring several hundred new accounts. What impact would that have on the system? Well, the purpose of tonight's presentation is really to do sort of the grand summary. In other words, look at what the impact of all 4 of these major different analyses would be, and what would the impact be on the ratepayers. What would be the combined impact of all of these analyses on the water and wastewater fund and on the rates themselves? So, like with any analysis, it's going to be dependent on a series of assumptions. Because remember one thing about analyses and forecasts. When you do these financial forecasts, forecasts are not guarantees. Forecasts are predictions based on a series of assumptions about what you think is going to happen in the future. Now, of course, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell the future with perfect accuracy. But at the same time, I think you can safely make some general assumptions about what's going to happen in the future. And when we do this grand analysis here, we have to make a series of assumptions about certain things that are going to happen. For example, when will you implement these projects? When would you buy the Prescott accounts? When would you do the Highway 89 expansion? Second thing would be, what would be the total cost of all this? And finally, how would the projects be financed? Because how you finance a project is going to be very critical in determining what the ultimate impact would be on a residential ratepayer's monthly charges. Okay, let's talk about the current rate plan first, before I talk about all these modifications to it. Under the current rate plan, we assumed that operating expenses would increase by 3 to 5% a year, and that's pretty much what's happening. Remember, cost of everything goes up by 3% a year just due to the rate of inflation. And so any well-constructed financial plan has to take into consideration the fact that things are going to cost more tomorrow than they did today. We also assumed in the original rate plan that there would be only very nominal growth in new accounts. Only a few accounts a year would be added. We assumed that buy-in fees would be increased in 2014, and that's exactly what's happened. And finally, the original rate plan did make a couple of assumptions about acquiring the Fan wastewater system. It assumed that you would pay about $2 million to acquire the system. But if you acquired the system, the town was very confident that it could reduce operating expenses by about $175,000 a year. That's very important because that means that you get a positive return on the investment you make in acquiring the fan plant, and that will benefit your ratepayers. Okay, this is the rate plan that the town currently has in effect. I'm going to first show you the rates, and then I'll show you what the impact will be on an average monthly bill. You just put your latest rate plan into effect in January of 2014. As you can see, for a residential ratepayer, they now pay a minimum charge of $5.13 a month with a volume rate based on the amount of usage per month. If you use between 0 and 8,000 gallons a month, you pay $4.18 per 1,000 gallons. If you use between 8 and 20,000 gallons, your rate goes up to $5.23 a month. And then if you use above 20,000 gallons, your rate goes to $7.32. This is what's known as a conservation rate. The idea behind this rate is that it encourages people to be as conservative as possible in their water usage, because the more you use, the more you pay. At the same time, it ensures that those people who use only amounts of water that they need for what is known as non-discretionary purposes, things like bathing and drinking and washing dishes, you pay the lowest rate for that amount of water. You see, here in Chino Valley, the average family uses about 6,000 to 7,000 gallons of water a month. So under this rate plan, the average ratepayer pays the least amount. It's only when you get above 7,000 or so gallons a month that you're starting to move into what's known as discretionary water usage, lawn watering, car washing, outdoor water usage. That's the water that you use that you pay the higher rates for. And so the majority of Chino Valley residents actually pay the lowest rate under this rate structure. At the same time, there's an old economic principle that says that if you raise the price of something, you get less of it. So if people know that if they use greater amounts of water, they're going to pay more for it, then that encourages them to minimize, to the best extent possible, their water usage. On the wastewater side, a residential customer right now pays a monthly flat fee of $58.31. As you can see, the rate plan calls for additional rate adjustments in 2015, 2016, and 2017. Now, the rate plan itself ends in 2017, but under the 10-year plan that we put together in 2012, we projected rates all the way up through 2022. And under that plan, it indicated that 2017 is not the last year that rate adjustments are going to be needed, and that, as you can see, in 2018, an additional rate adjustment would be needed as well. Now, look, the average water and wastewater ratepayer here in the state of Arizona is seeing their monthly bills increase by 5 to 6% every year. The cost of water is going up at an alarming rate all throughout the state of Arizona. So higher water costs are an unfortunate but inevitable fact of life. The rate plan that you put in place recognizes that, and it also recognizes the fact that further adjustments would be needed under the status quo. Now, what does this mean in terms of what people pay? Well, if you're an average residential ratepayer and you use 7,500 gallons a month, and again, that's about what the average ratepayer uses, right now your monthly bill for water and wastewater service is $94.79. That's a $6 increase from what it was in 2013. As you can see, under the current rate plan, the monthly bill is slated to go up to $101 in 2015, which is another $7 increase, $109 in 2016, and $118 in 2017. So additional rate adjustments are necessary and required under the current rate plan. Now, remember, that rate plan was developed in 2012. Now, since then, you've done some significant additional analysis. You've looked at the acquisition of the Prescott accounts. You've looked at the acquisition of the Wilhoit accounts. You've looked at the investing in Highway 89 to expand the water and sewer system to increase your capability of servicing new accounts. All of those will impact the rate plan. And so, what we're going to show you is what the impact of those combined scenarios will be on this rate plan. Now, I'm going to show you two scenarios. The difference between the two scenarios is dependent on one question, and that one question is, how do you want to pay the capital costs for acquiring the Prescott accounts and building the Highway 89 infrastructure and acquiring FAN? Because it's going to cost you a lot of money to do that. So basically, you've got two choices. You can fund all those costs through revenue bonds, What a revenue bond is that is a bond that is repaid out of water and sewer monthly rates. So if you issue a bond, you've got to raise your rate to pay the debt service on the bond that you've issued. That's what's known as a revenue bond. The second scenario assumes that you fund it through tax bonds, where what you would do is you would buy all this, you would invest in all this infrastructure, but the debt would be repaid out of your general obligation or your tax bonds or your property tax. So what will the impact be? Let's take a look at it. How much money do you need in order to acquire the Prescott accounts and do the Highway 89 expansion? This chart shows you that. As you can see, if you were to purchase the Prescott and the Wilhoit water systems, that would cost the town of Chino Valley about $4.2 million. If you purchase the wastewater treatment plant from FAN, under the latest scenario, that cost would be somewhere around $2.7 million. It's gone up a little bit since the completion of the 2012 rate study. If you do the Highway 89 area's expansion, the water costs and the wastewater costs would be roughly equivalent at about $3 million each. So basically, you've got $13 million in capital costs. Now, what do you get for those capital costs? Well, you get about 1,000 new accounts, and you get the ability to service additional accounts in Highway 89. So you're making an investment, but in return, you're getting a lot of new ratepayers. And those ratepayers will help offset a significant portion of the additional cost that you will incur in doing this. So under the first scenario, we're going to assume that you decide that you're just going to issue revenue bonds, that you're going to make your monthly rates pay for all of this. What will the impact be? Well, the impact will be actually beneficial to the town. And this is why. Because while you're investing $13 million in the future of the town of Chino Valley, you are also going to acquire over 1,000 new water accounts. Right now, you've got 550 water accounts, and you have 1,674 wastewater accounts. But if you buy Prescott and Wilhoit, all of a sudden, you're going to add 1,944 new accounts. And when you expand the Highway 89 investments, you're going to add a couple hundred new water accounts as well. So you'll go from 550 accounts to 1,798 accounts. So think about it this way. Many, if not most, of the costs of running a water system are fixed. So the more accounts you have, the less each person has to pay in order to make yourselves whole. That's why it is very beneficial, for the most part, for utilities to acquire new accounts. When you're acquiring new customers, you're acquiring new monthly charges, and you're offsetting the charges paid for by other customers. Now, on the wastewater side, the growth is still there. You'd be adding about 400 new accounts, going from 1,670 wastewater accounts at present to over 2,000 in the year 2022. So, in the interest of time, I'm just going to quickly go over a couple of these charts. I'm going to skip ahead to the residential rate recommendations. Under scenario 1, if you acquire Prescott and Wilhoit and do the Highway 89 investments, you will and you pay for it through revenue bonds, you will still need rate increases, but the rate increases will not be as significant as the current rate plan has right now. The water rate increases would be essentially the same, but the wastewater rate increases would be a little bit less. Your monthly bill of $58 right now, under the current plan, is slated to go to $79 by 2017. Under this plan, it only goes to $73. That's because the additional accounts are required are offsetting part of your costs. So, what that really tells us is that your $7,500 water user, your average residential ratepayer, under the current plan, sees his bill go from $94 to $118 by 2017. Under scenario 1, it goes from $94 to $113. So it still increases, but the increases are a little bit less. And the reason is that you have added all these new accounts to your system. So it is a benefit under this plan. Not only will you invest in the future of your community, building assets that will literally still be here 50 years from now, but you'll be able to do that and lessen the impact of the rate plan on your ratepayers as well. Now let's go to the second scenario. The second scenario says, well, let's do it a different way. Why don't, instead of paying for it through revenue bonds, we pay for it through tax bonds? So under scenario 2, you've got the same growth, you've got the same acquisition, and the same increases in your operating costs. You're still acquiring all those Prescott accounts. You're still acquiring FAN and making the savings, having the $175,000 a year in savings. You're still acquiring Wilhoit, and you're still building Highway 89. But none of those costs are going to be funded in the water system. They're all going to be funded through tax bonds. So what that means is that you're going to have all these new accounts, but you're not going to have the corresponding debt. So as a result, if you do it this way under the tax bond scenario, in my opinion, I believe that you could eliminate the need for any rate adjustments for at least the next 5 years. In other words, the rates that are in place today, you would suspend or eliminate the rate increases scheduled for 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018. This is why. Because your costs on your water utility go up. As you can see, they go way up. They double, but you've quadrupled the number of water customers. So as a result, you don't need another rate increase because the growth is paying for it. Same thing's true on the wastewater side. So what does that mean? It means that your rate plan that you adopted, that is in effect right now in January of 2014, stays the same for the next 4 years. As you can see, no rate increase. No wastewater rate increase either. So, when you compare the two scenarios, you see that under the current plan, you're slated to go from $94 to $118 in 2017, $113 in scenario 1, and under the tax bond scenario, it stays at $94. So what that means is that it's a reduction of increase of between $20 and $25 a month per residential ratepayer.
Okay.
Now look, I want to make this very clear. This doesn't mean rates are going to go down. Water and wastewater rates are not going to go down in the state of Arizona anywhere ever again. What it means is that they won't go up. So, while you will be looking at a tax obligation for your household based on the property value of your house, you're also looking at $20 to $25 a month in water rate increases that you're not going to otherwise have. So, the bottom line is this. Anytime a utility has the ability to quadruple the number of accounts it has, financially speaking, that's a good thing. The addition of the Prescott accounts, the Wilhoit accounts, and the investment in Highway 89 that leads to further account growth along the highway will ease the burden on your current ratepayers and will ease the magnitude of the need for future rate increases. Furthermore, if you make the decision that instead of funding it from revenue bonds, you're going to fund it through tax bonds, in my opinion, it means that you can eliminate the need for any rate adjustments for at least the next 5 years. Now, I just want to finally, summarize this by making the same caveat that I always make. This is based on a projection. And this projection also assumes that you will be successful in acquiring those accounts in the next year or two. I have no reason to believe that you won't be. But the idea of not doing rate increases is very contingent on the ability of acquiring the Prescott accounts. I think it's a good thing for the town. I think it will make your water system a better system, a stronger system, and it will ease the burden on the ratepayers. That really concludes my prepared remarks. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Okay. Yes, sir, Mr. Wojcik?
You say the average usage for water is 7,500 gallons?
That's about right, yeah.
I assume this is only people that are using city water. This is not an average of people that are on wells and what have you.
That's correct. It's based on people using city water.
Does that include commercial as well as residential?
No, that's residential. Commercial usage is a little higher.
I mean, can I answer?
Yes, sir, you can ask a follow-up.
Most of the people I know are either on private wells, community wells, private water systems. Where do we get all these people from?
Well, you have about 550 accounts in your water system right now, and at least 500 of them are residential.
Are they like Bright Star and I don't
Excuse
know
me
where they
for a
come.
second. I think Mr. Gripman would need to answer that.
Yeah, most of our existing water customers are within the Bright Star Highland Ranch area. We have a few of them along Road 1 East and some other areas. In the commercial areas, what we serve is the south side of Safeway. Safeway itself is on City of Prescott water, but the commercial properties that we serve are from the little check cashing place down around where Arizona State Savings and Credit Union is. And we also service the post office and the little locksmith place on the south side of 2 North. Those are our commercial accounts. It's a very, very small percentage.
But Bright Star and the others that are 1,600 people, that's what we've got?
Not on water. It's only 500 and
Oh, 500 of them.
550 on water. We have 1,600, just under 1,700 sewer accounts. And that includes both Chino Meadows, Bright Star, Highlands Ranch. Safeway is on town sewer. Everything along 2 North is all on sewer.
Just for clarification, Mr. Wojcik, I think the accounts that they were talking about picking up, the additional accounts, that's Chino Meadows 5, Chino Meadows 1. Where was the
For the
majority
water
of those?
accounts?
For the water
It's actually Prescott Water and Wilhoit. Prescott Water is 650 customers right now that they have, and Wilhoit has right around 100, give or take,
Okay.
100, 110.
Did that answer
Chino
what you?
Meadows 5 is in there, that's where I live.
No, that Chino Meadows Unit 5 is served by Prescott, or by Chino Meadows Water Company.
Okay.
And we are not proposing to purchase the Chino Meadows Water Company. We're not proposing to purchase the Appaloosa Meadows Water Company. None of those. We're only talking 2
Okay.
systems that both of them are interested in selling. Wilhoit, which is the area behind Bonfire, and the Prescott Water customers, which they're up and down 89, they're all over the place. Chino Meadows Unit 1 is Prescott Water, for example.
Okay.
And can I make, I'd also like to make another comment about the acquisition of the Prescott accounts as well. Because the people who live in Chino Valley who are served by Prescott Water are outside the city limits of Prescott, they pay a premium over Prescott's already high rates. Now, Prescott hired some rate consultant about 4 years ago to do a rate study for them. It was us, actually. Unfortunately, the thing is, when you are that far away from a city, it costs the city more to provide service to you. So Prescott has a reason and a legitimate reason for charging you what they charge you for that water. But if the town of Chino Valley were to take over these accounts, those ratepayers would now pay Chino Valley inside city limit rates, which is about 40 to 45% below, less than what they would be paying right now. So the day the Prescott customers become Chino Valley customers, they'll see their water bill go down by about 40 to 45%.
Okay.
It's a win-win situation for everybody. Prescott gets rid of the accounts that are on their outermost perimeter and they're most expensive to service. They get rid of the burden, they get a payment of money from Chino. Chino gets new customers to offset their costs, and the people who live there get a 45% reduction in their water bill. There is no downside here.
Okay, cool. Yes, ma'am, you're next.
Certainly, I would first comment that I'm not including in my question. I would take issue as to whether there's a valid reason. They did it because they could. I mean, we're much closer to the water source than they are. And, you know, they increased the rate because they could. The law permitted it. Now, my question is, I'm wondering, as I look at these numbers, the first year, the 5831, goes up by $6, correct? For wastewater and maybe $1 for the water.
Yeah, that sounds about
And
right.
you multiply that out, $72 for the wastewater plus an additional 12. How much is the tax, the property tax or the bond tax for a general obligation bond going to add? I mean, you may be decreasing the rates, but you may be increasing the overall cost if we don't know what the cost is going to be per 100,000.
Mr. Gripman?
As I said at the start, this has been a long time in coming here. Last year at the utility committee that the council appointed to look at extending water and sewer up and down 89 much farther than what we're doing, than what we're proposing under this plan right here. The average home with an assessed value of $100,000 was $8.73 per month is what that assessment would be. To give you an idea, it's approximately a home that would sell for about $250,000. Your assessed value would be right around $100,000 under those numbers, and your bill would be $8.73 per month. The water bill and the sewer decreases that we looked at a year ago, when you look at the savings that you're going to get on the water side versus the increase on your property tax, you'll save about $25 a month overall. Now, the interesting thing about this.
Mr. Gritman, can you demonstrate that? Because you're increasing the rate, the first year is $6 and $1 on water. If you multiply that out, 6 and 1 is 7, and you're saying that the cost is $8.73. Is that for the whole year?
First of all, everything that I said to you is based on last year's. The council has not given us any direction on how to move on how you want to proceed with this. If council would like to have the analysis done of what the general obligation bond impacts would be under this scenario, that's your direction, that's your next direction. However, I'm giving you information that came out from last year. Last year's bond issuance was right around $10 million that the committee was recommending. The assessment under that scenario was $8.73. When I'm talking about a $24 savings, it's actually over the entire next 3 years of rate increases. While it's easy to sit at a council meeting and run numbers like this, and Mark Reeder can attest to this, the numbers aren't set up to be run like that. You just don't run them in a 2-second calculation here. These are very complex assessments and complex calculations that they do. If the council is interested in that, Mr. Reeder is here to receive any direction you want to give him on these next analyses that are going to need to be done on what the general obligation bond impacts would look like. And then we can run you all the different cost savings you want. If you want to have them done on a year-to-year basis, we can do it. If you want to have it over an aggregate over the next 3 years, we can do that too. All of that is dependent upon direction from the council.
Okay, the direction from council right now is Mr. Reeder is right behind you, and I imagine he could answer Ms. Hatch's
Can I just,
question.
I'm not against improving water and wastewater, but I think we ought to be truthful to the people. You're selling this based on a rate savings, but the people need to know what the actual cost is going to be.
And yes, ma'am, I believe we are attempting to be truthful with folks. We need to let them know what their utility bills will be and what their bond bills or tax bills will be. Mr. Reeder, you know something about bonds, don't you?
I hope so. I'm in real trouble, especially with this council. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, good evening. Mark Reeder with Stiefel Nicholas, and like Mr. Jackson, we've had the privilege of working with your community for many, many years. And we were just retained, recently by the town of Chino Valley to assist with kind of what we're talking about tonight. And we know that there's a couple options on the table here that are being considered. Obviously, no decisions being made tonight. But once I receive some direction from council or from staff relative to a possible interest in a general obligation bond election, then we're going to go to work, okay? And obviously come back and have a very thorough educational study session on the great questions being asked. A couple things on that front. At the end of the day, a general obligation bond is paid back from secondary property taxes. The amount of property taxes paid by all of us is a function of a couple of things. One, the size of the bond issue. Right now, maybe 13 million, maybe 13.1 million, maybe something less. What the tax rate is, okay? And then what the value of property each of us own. Because a property tax bond is a function of value of your property or properties and what the tax rate is. And we'll model all that, okay? Now, another thing that we're going to go to work on once we receive direction from council and from staff is we're going to go out and work really, really hard to maximize extremely low interest rate loans, okay, and some possible grant money. Now, no guarantees on that. We've been in touch with WIFA, who has been a partner of the town in the past, and WIFA is a state agency, and their mission and their goal is to help with financing at the lowest cost of capital possible. Okay? And we're hoping that you're going to, because of your high rates already, we're hoping you're going to be considered what's known as a disadvantaged community. No disrespect, but they have their own criteria. It's more of a federal thing, and we're hoping that because of that, that they're going to provide a significant subsidy to our cost of capital, and we're also going to be very aggressive and respectful, and we're going to ask them for what they call forgivable principal. They do have a program called Forgivable Principal on the water side and on the wastewater side. We had a call with them the other day. They're open for business. They're very, very interested. And so over the next, I would say, 2-3 weeks, we're going to try to get answers to all those questions. Then, like Mr. Jackson, we're going to model them in with some assumptions, and then we're going to come up and spend a lot of time with council and the community to educate you on the question being asked, and that is, what is the cost to a property owner if we pursue a bond election based on a tax rate we'll come up with and based on a value of property or properties for each citizen. So I just wanted to make those remarks. We're not quite prepared. We have a little bit of time, but we're going to go to work immediately once we receive direction from the council.
Excellent, thank you. Did that answer that question, Ms. Hatch? Okay, and you wanted to follow up?
Yeah, these are what, 20-year bonds?
Generally, that's WIFA's preference is to go about 20 years. Sometimes we've been successful at the 30-year to stretch that, lower that tax rate down. So we'll probably ask that question too, but we'll either go 20 or 30, but their preference is 20 generally.
Okay, thank you. In other words,
thank
we
you.
don't know what the full cost is yet.
We'll find out.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I assume there was no questions for Mr. Reeder on this side. Okay, Mr. Jackson, you're back up.
I'm just here to see if you have any further questions.
All right. Did anyone here have any further questions for Mr. Jackson before I start? Any others on this side? Okay. I had a couple of questions. If any of these puzzle pieces if any of the pieces doesn't fall into place, for example, we are unable to negotiate a reasonable price on the wastewater treatment plant. Say the owner decides he wants to sell it for twice as much or whatever, and we can't come we come to an impasse. Or say the city of Prescott decides that they don't wish to sell their water system to us. And I understand Wilhoit's a fairly small piece of the puzzle, so we're not gonna worry too much about that. But if a major puzzle piece doesn't fall into place, will the entire bond issue, will this entire structure implode, or will we just have not as many advantages out of it? Tell me, just thumbnail sketch, what would happen if the wastewater treatment plant were unable to purchase it?
That's a fair question, and that is a question that always should be considered whenever you look at a financial forecast, because like I said before, it's not a guarantee. Nothing is guaranteed in life except death and taxes. So you have to look at the different pieces of this puzzle, and you have to ask the very legitimate question, what happens if certain things do not happen? And that's why it's always very prudent for a town in your position to continually monitor the financial position of the utility and adapt if any changes come in place. I will tell you off the top of my head that probably the biggest single piece of the puzzle is the Prescott acquisition, because that's 656 new ratepayers overnight. The Highway 89 is a very significant piece of the puzzle as well, because despite the investment, you get a lot of new hookups, and many of those hookups are likely to be commercial, which are larger water users, which brings in more revenue to the town as well. I would argue that if any of these pieces of the puzzle do not pan out, if you're not able to acquire FAN, or if you're not able to acquire Wilhoit, I think you need to go back and reassess the situation. That's why you have to be, I guess, a little careful about saying there will be no rate increases for 5 years. There will be no rate increases for 5 years if everything happens. So if one or more of these things don't happen, you will have to go back and reassess the situation.
Okay, okay. So-
I don't think there's anything in here that's a deal breaker. There's nothing that's going to completely blow up the deal if it doesn't happen. But if something doesn't happen, you will have to go back and rerun the numbers.
Excellent. That's what I wanted to hear, was it won't be a deal breaker if one of those pieces, it'll be semi-catastrophic if we don't get the Prescott water system, because we're planning on all those hookups. But
And one final thing, when I say what is the most important piece of the puzzle, I'm looking at this from a financial perspective. I'm the guy who says, great, new accounts, new revenues. To me, that's the most important thing. Now, from an operations standpoint, the argument could be made that the Highway 89 expansion is the most important piece of the puzzle. So what's most important, I guess, depends on your perspective.
okay. One other item you had mentioned, commercial accounts. If we do the Highway 89 expansion, those commercial accounts, Town Manager, Mr. Smith, do the commercial accounts come directly to the town, or do they go to Mr. Fan? What's the payment on commercial accounts?
Under the current structure, Mayor, connection fees go to Mr. Fan to defray the construction costs of the plant. If we're able to negotiate a settlement with Fan Contracting to bring an end to that construction agreement, then those commercial connections, those capital dollars would come to the town.
Okay, okay. All right.
And Mayor, I do have a couple of things to add before we.
Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
One thing I wanted to address was just in general the process. If we take a step back from all the details and look at the process, we wanted to bring you the summation from all of this analysis. But here again, there are detailed questions that need to be answered. We're hopeful that at some point the bond committee can be brought back to evaluate these things. We want to provide those details to that committee. There's analysis yet left to do before we can make a recommendation and speak to the details of what does it mean to the average homeowner's pocket.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to reiterate on the capital side, one of the main reasons that we're looking at this is our capital funds in our capital improvement fund are currently going to prop up these enterprises, and they're also propping up our general fund. And that means that we're not putting them on the roads. And we've deferred about $8 million worth of work on the roads because of that. And if we're able to grow our local economy and increase the tax dollars that come to the town from the retail sales tax, and we can get our enterprises off of our capital improvement fund, we should have the monies that are necessary to take care of the capital side of the town's business.
Okay, and I understand the roads are another wolf outside the door. We're attempting to deal with the wolves one at a time. Later on, I need to, well, I guess we could do it right now. I need to let our council know that if we are bringing the bond committee back to look at this issue, we're going to have 4 openings that we need to fill, and so we need to be thinking on how we want to fill those openings. We'll address that in an upcoming council meeting. Yes, ma'am, you had a question?
Yeah, as I recall, with the prior bond committee, there was much discussion about, before we instituted expanding the sewer and water, that we needed to buy Fan and Prescott Water first as a prerequisite. I just want to be sure that I'm understanding correctly, that we're not having a precedent, we're not going to do that first, that we're asking to fund these things all together.
Yes, ma'am, I believe that's the
So
proposition.
we're not going along with what they had proposed before.
If we reconvene the bond committee, I suppose they could be looking at that. I think Mr. Jackson, unless the council wants to hire him to do another study.
I'm available.
I bet you are. Hopefully, we can look at this as one as one big picture. I had one more quick question, and then Mr. Wojcik. Most of our evening has been spent addressing the concept of general obligation bonds, that which is property tax upon the people of the town, and is a voted on item by the people of the town. The revenue bond itself, why have we moved away from that so much, or why did that receive such little discussion? Is that because of there's something that I'm not seeing in the picture? Yeah.
Well, I guess mainly because if you go the revenue bond route, the impact on your ratepayers is basically equivalent to what the current rate plan is right now. So it's basically status quo.
Okay.
You could fund these projects through revenue bonds while keeping your rate increases at or below what you've already adopted.
Okay.
But what I found particularly striking about the analysis was the fact that by removing that obligation from the water and sewer fund and making it a tax obligation, the benefit to the water and sewer fund and the water and sewer rates is striking and very immediate.
Okay.
In that you could basically immediately suspend all of your future water and wastewater rate increases for the next 5 years or so.
Okay, so in 25 words or less, for our audience sake, both here and at home, the general obligation bond spreads that cost out over the populace of the entire town. The revenue bond raises the rates for the existing ratepayers.
That's correct.
I wanted our audience to know that, because there's a lot of folks that are watching this, and we make it available. It'll be viewed, I'm sure, several times in the future. So I believe Mr. Wojcik was next, and then Ms. Hatch.
I was on that committee last year for the infrastructure on 89, and I was led to believe that we could not buy fan out with financed bond money. Is that not true, Robert?
The portion of our agreements with with Fan Contracting and Fan
Excuse me for
Environment.
just a second. I don't believe your microphone's on.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. We have two agreements with two different organizations. We have an agreement for operation and maintenance of that plant with Fan Environmental. And there is a profit margin in that agreement where Mr. Fan realizes a profit, or the owners of Fan Environmental realize a profit. The construction manager at risk agreement with Fan Contracting for the wastewater treatment plant is for $1 certain. It is a specific amount of money that Fan Contracting is paid for the construction of the plant. There's not a question as to profit or anything like that. It's an amount certain. What we've been told by Mr. Cafiso is the O&M agreement is the problematic part, because that's where profit is involved, and the construction management at risk agreement is not a problem. The O&M agreement is going to term this year if we don't extend it, and if it's possible for us to reach a settlement with Mr. Fan on the construction with Fan Contracting with the construction management at risk agreement, then with those two companies out of the operation of the enterprise, we're able to save about $175,000 a year, and we're also able to receive the capital dollars that come from connections to expand the collection system on our sewer side, and that's one of our main goals, is to collect as much effluent as we can, because since we're in an active management area for water, our best source of water right now is to percolate or recharge effluent flows. And so for us to bank water for the future development of the town, we need to be recharging our effluent, and we need to capture as much of that as we can.
Mr. Smith, just to briefly recap Mr. Wojcik's question, you had said that there was, you had thought we couldn't bond, and Mr. Smith said that if we do the construction manager at risk part, then we can bond it. So did that answer your question?
I'm not sure we answered the question. It's my understanding from his answer is that we have to buy out the management part before we can bond the rest of it. Is that?
No, we need to terminate the O&M agreement because it's the
Terminate.
agreement that has profit interest in it. And Mr. Cafiso is telling us that that agreement has to go away.
Okay. So only that portion of it goes.
And if we leave the CM at risk agreement there, we wind up funneling all of the capital dollars from connections to pay off the construction of the plant, and we don't have any funds to extend the system and try and grow it.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Hatch, you're next.
If we just go back to revenue bonds again, if only the people who are currently on the system are paying that bill, they're the only ones paying for expansion. Is that correct under the revenue bond?
Under a revenue bond scenario, that is true. However, as new accounts are hooked up, they begin paying a portion of the revenue bonds as well. So it's only the actual users of the system that pay for it under that scenario.
Okay, so they're bearing the burden of the expansion.
That's correct.
So a small portion of the town who has been bearing the burden of this, if we do the revenue bonds and we, as you said, quadruple the size of the system, then theoretically, 3 more groups of folks, the amount of folks paying will quadruple, but the amount that the folks have been paying will be relatively the same. Okay.
Well, under the revenue bond scenario, you are looking at additional rate increases.
Yeah.
Your monthly bill will go up by another $25 over the next 4 years. Under the general obligation bond scenario, your monthly bill will not go up over the next 4 years.
Okay.
At all.
Excellent. Thank you. Follow-up question, Ms. Hatch?
Yeah, the $25 is already in our rate plan.
That's
It would go
correct.
up anyway, so going revenue bonds doesn't increase that.
That's correct.
The other thing is when you're adding ratepayers, some of those are water and some are sewer. The 600 ratepayers are water. That doesn't help the sewer system at all unless they're also on sewer. So it's a little bit hard to talk about adding 600 ratepayers because those of us on Prescott Water aren't necessarily on the sewer system. So it's a little confusing.
Yes. Yes, and that's why when you do presentations of this nature, you always try to look at it from an average standpoint. I mean, an average is what it means. Some are below, some are above. There's always going to be unique circumstances, but in trying to take a very complex analysis like this and summarize it into a couple of easy to understand and remember points, the best way to do it is through the use of an average.
You bet. And that was from the very beginning of this study. We knew we had some folks on Prescott Water, some folks on town of Chino Valley Water, some on the Chino Valley Water Company water. We had several different water suppliers, and even as Mr. Wojcik pointed out, some on their own wells. And then amongst those, some of them on sewer and some not on sewer.
Yes.
If you take nothing else away from the meeting, take this away. Nothing is ever simple in Chino, and so we're working our way through that. You had something to add, Mr. Jackson? No?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Mr. Wojcik had another question.
It's just a quickie, hopefully. Do we know how many people are on city water and city sewers currently?
Yeah.
It's in your presentation.
Doesn't show me how many people are on both, though.
Both, yeah.
We've got a number of those.
The question, Mr. Gritman, was those who are on both of those items.
Yeah, it's pretty much what I said before. The same folks within Highlands Ranch, Bright Star, and the commercial area along Road 2 North. They're on both water and sewer. The folks in Chino Meadows are on Prescott Water, Town Sewer, Chino Meadows Unit 1, Prescott Water, Town Sewer. The remaining portions of Chino Meadows Water Company, Town Sewer.
How many?
You have that
Did I miss
confused
something
look.
How many?
You were wanting an exact number.
Well, I mean,
We have
I'm not looking
approximately,
exact, but some.
we have approximately 600 that are on both water and sewer.
Okay.
We have 1,600, just under 1,700 that are on total sewer. So if you subtract those numbers, it'll tell you the ones that are on another water company and yet on our sewer.
Okay.
My
So it's
question
about
was how many are on
1,200.
both? 600 is the answer.
It's about 600 on both.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, okay,
Thank you.
excellent, thank you, sir. Any other questions on this side? Any other questions on this side? I'm going to open to the audience. Sometimes I need to make this clear. According to law, we're not required to open it up to the audience, but I do like to open up and get some questions from the audience. I'm going to, we'll probably cut it out about 2 in the morning, so please keep your questions short, okay? Ma'am, did you have a question, if you would? Please state your name and then ask your question.
Hi, everyone.
Okay.
Mayor and Council, my name is Annie Lean. I had 2 questions. One, does this project proposal include providing water and sewer along Highway 89 to promote new businesses coming? Or is this a separate matter altogether? I was unclear on that.
Okay. And did you want to ask your second question, and then hopefully they can answer both, or is the second one pretty complex?
It's in addition to.
Oh, okay, a clarification.
Yes.
Mr. Gritman, did you want to answer that, or?
Yeah, I
Okay.
can speak to that. The proposed project as it stands today would include water and sewer on Highway 89, well, on both sides of it, from 3 north where the McDonald's is, down to 2 south where the Safeway is.
2 north.
I'm sorry, 2 north, sorry.
Okay, and it's my understanding that commercial businesses require municipal water and sewer. Is that included in this plan?
That's what we found over time that the franchise businesses, the larger chains all require municipal water and sewer in order to locate.
Okay, and here's my follow-up.
Okay.
Speaking for myself and my friends and family in the area, I know that citizens are pretty tax fatigued as it is. So my question is, A, is that a selling point that we are hoping to increase businesses coming in by doing this? And if we don't go scenario 1, is the burden going to be on all the citizens of the town of Chino Valley, or just the consumers that are using the water and sewer?
Under the revenue bond proposal, which is scenario number 1, that's just the people that are connected to services paying for the expansion of the system.
Okay, and so scenario 2 would be the entire
Yes,
community?
scenario 2 would be a tax on every property in the town of Chino Valley.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir, Mr. Mason.
My name is Dave Macy. Mr. Mayor, Council, my concern is exactly what commercial properties along Highway 89 would be affected by this bond issue. How far off the highway are you going to go? And if it's just specifically along the highway, are there plans to expand it in both directions off the highway? 1. 2, nowhere up here on this chart have I seen what the commercial rates are going to be for businesses that are obligated to hook up to this system, both for water and sewer.
Okay.
I understand it will be based upon the usage, and in my case, the usage would be extremely small as compared to somebody like Safeway.
Yeah.
The reason for this expansion is to bring more businesses into the town to increase the property tax revenue for the town, which I can appreciate. But if we're going to do this expansion and then rebate the sales tax back to box stores to come in for a number of years to entice them to come here, That is a concern of mine. Also, if we bring in large entities, whether or not they will destroy the local businesses, the little guys that have been carrying this town from day one. Everything in this town has been paid for by the business in this town, the sales tax that they collect, the hard work that these little guys have done. The blood, sweat, and tears, the losses, the heartbreaks. It's tough. And when, ideally, if you bring a Walmart in or some type of big box store like that, all the little guys get destroyed.
Yes, sir. You had two questions there, and now we're going to need you to repeat them, Mr. Smith. Well, yeah, I'm not being sarcastic. I'm simply
Right.
saying, if Councilman Turner was here, he would give you a hearty amen on the box store stuff.
Right.
But you asked two specific questions, and I believe, Mr. Smith, you could probably best answer them. Go ahead, Mr. Mazie.
First of all, the specific properties that would be affected by the Highway 89 expansion.
We do have some generic, not generic, but general plans developed at this point that show where the main trunk lines would be on each side of 89. And I believe that Ron has details on the properties that would be involved in, or that would be accessible to the lines that we've got drawn out. But I don't think that we have any more than, what, 40, 50% plans? I mean, we don't have, yeah. Well, our main objective in planning where those trunk lines would be was to try and avoid residential property. And the trunk lines will be major collector lines, and, you know, service lines will have to be created to attach people to those main trunk lines. And Ron, we'll have to pull the plans out and look. I know that they know the numbers, but the exact properties we would have to look.
Right, that's one concern, correct. Okay. So that mapping will be available upon request.
I think we already have the general plans. We're happy to provide that stuff.
All right, I will contact Mr. Gritman for that then.
And you asked a question about plans to expand. Because of the town's water situation and the difficulty we have in importing HIA water from the north of us, I mean, the town made investment in HIA water to the north of us, and we're finding we can't get it into town. And really, our main resource for creating water for the future is recharging. And we've got to start banking the volumes that we're recharging so we can save it for later.
Right. In addition to that, though, every private well you close down, you get a water credit.
Yes, there is a water credit, and I don't remember what that ratio is. It's 1 to 5 or something like that. Is it 1 to 4?
Yeah,
If I may.
certainly.
Sorry. Yeah, it's a quarter of an acre foot that we would get for every well that we would, quote, shut down. However, we're not proposing to shut down any wells. Under all the scenarios that we've talked about, there's a mandatory hookup, but you don't have to use the water. The reason you can still use your well. The reason why there's a mandatory hookup is because we're extending fire hydrants too. So the commercial properties will gain fire protection. And so that's why there's the requirement to hook up, but you can still use your well. We're not proposing to take wells. We're not proposing to shut anybody's wells down. The only thing you can't use is your septic system. That one we have to crush and do the DEQ stuff too. But we're not proposing to actually require business owners to abandon their wells. So the quarter of an acre foot isn't in play here. The town wouldn't be gaining anything. It's just a mandatory hookup for the fire flow portion.
I would assume, though, that if you're tearing up a roadway to lay it, if you're digging up a roadway to lay a line, a sewer line, that you will in turn lay a water line simultaneously so that we don't have to come back and tear it up again.
Yeah,
Mr. Mazie, we're not going to have an ongoing deal, but that's something that probably was in the minds of our audience also. And it's been a concern of mine that if we tear the roads up, let's get everything laid in there.
we'll only do it one time, but we can't put water and sewer in the same trench. DEQ won't allow us to do that. We have to separate them. But Anyway, yes, we're putting water and sewer up, well, the proposal is to put water and sewer up and down both the east side and the west side of 89. We're not going to be on 89, we're going to be outside to the east and to the west of it, because we want to avoid dealing with ADOT and their requirements. So we're going to be away from it. And I do have maps, I'll be happy to print them off and give them to you.
Excellent, excellent. Did that answer your question? Yes, sir.
I had one more thing to add to the suite of questions Mr. Mazie had, and that is, we currently have a policy that allows us to amortize out those fees. So when we propose a connection to a user, we allow them to spread that fee out over 10 years. And so we're doing everything we can to try and lessen the sting.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir, Mr. Best.
I've got, maybe through all my studies and what have you, it's not so much the wells that we're concerned about, but if we can put sewer in and we can measure what we put back in the wells, and that gives us water rights. So we can increase water just by having more people on the sewer, so we can tell the state we're reaching safe yield. And that's what I've got out of most of my lessons here on water and sewer. So we want to have sewer to everybody in town as much as possible.
I understand that, but in 23 years that I've owned my commercial property, I have spent exactly zero on my septic tank, not a penny. So if we're proposing that I'm going to be spending $100 or $200 a month or whatever it turns out to be, above and beyond what I have spent in the past, that greatly adds to my overhead.
You bet, you bet.
So it creates problems for a small business to survive.
Understood. Thank you, sir.
Okay?
All right. One more from the audience. Did we have anyone else? Okay. Yes, sir.
Mayor and Council. Tom Payne, I'm a business owner here in Chino Valley as well. Just a couple quick things. Whoops, can't see you with those. See that. A couple things got touched on. The safe yield is important in my mind. Water, obviously, but Prescott and not having them serve our area here, that actually hurts economic development because they don't get any of the recharge. And so it's basically just a draw on their system. So I believe National Bank was the last one that came in and had a real hard time hooking up to the Prescott water system because Prescott Water sees that as a negative and harder for them to reach safe yield, and that hurts economic development in our town. So I think that that's part of the picture here that needs to be looked at and is important. We mentioned the fire hydrants. Ron just mentioned that really briefly, and I think that needs a little bit more of a touch on it because that's a safety issue. Fire flow is huge. Fire protection to our businesses and our citizens is huge, and I think we need to take that into consideration too. I believe the fire department has a little bit of interest in that as well. The other thing that the fire flow does for small business owners is that right now, if you develop a naked piece of property and you're going to put up a building on it, you're going to have to put in, I believe it's a 10,000-gallon tank for fire flow. I think that's what it is. And that's a huge burden on a business. Huge burden on a business. That shuts a lot of people off the doors right there. That's about the end of my notes that I think that weren't touched on as much as that I wanted to see done. So,
Okay, thank you. And something to add to what Mr. Payne said about the fire flow issue, and we didn't want to be here all night, but one of the issues with fire flow is that when our fire department is having to deal with Prescott, trying to use Prescott's water to put out a fire in Chino, to me that's unconscionable. We don't need to be involved in that. We need to be able to put fires out and put them out now. And as Mr. Payne mentioned, a lot of business owners, that's a big burden on them to get the water tank in. So, all right. Any other questions on this side? Any other questions on this side? Mr. Smith, did you have anything to add? All right. The chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
There you go. Second.
Okay, a motion in 2 seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you for your attendance this evening.